Hello everyone and welcome once more to our English first additional language lesson by Ms. Lichuchi. Today we are going to look into the summary of the novel titled Cry the Beloved Country. And before we can even go into the details of the novel, it is important to also take time to look into the title that says Cry the Beloved Country. Once someone cries, it's an expression of sadness, an expression of pain. And the word beloved has connotations of love and affection, meaning that you are crying for someone whom you hold dearly to your heart, somebody whom you love. And in this particular case, we are speaking about the country. Which country? It is indeed South Africa. So the title resembles or gives an indication of what it is expected in the novel, that which is a novel that expresses a very painful journey of a father who searches for his son physically under difficult circumstances, and also portrays, if not depicts, the environment in South Africa and the atmosphere in South Africa at that particular years or those particular years, which was South Africa under the apartheid regime. And we know that the apartheid regime inflicted pain in the blacks, given the inhumane laws that were there to segregate whites from black, and also serve the palates of white by preserving or affording good or better opportunities only for white people, whilst at the expense of blacks. Now, with that said, Allen Patton uses the characters, which are the two fathers, James Jarvis and Reverend Stephen Kumalo, to exploit and take us through the journey of the depth of apartheid, but also through the journey of the depth of pain experienced by the two protagonists, whom are Reverend Stephen Kumalo and James Jarvis, through their loss, as both of them, they've lost their sons. So the title indeed gives an indication that it's a novel centered around pain, but not only pain that is experienced by the characters, but pain that was also experienced by the people of South Africa because of due to the loss of apartheid regime, that which sought to dehumanize black people, but most importantly, also depicting the level or severity of inequalities that were present in the then South Africa as the novel was set in the 1940s. Now, with that said, Cry the Beloved Country is a novel written by a South African author by the name of Allen Patton, which was first published in 1948, set against the backdrop of South Africa in the 1940s, just prior to the imposition of the apartheid. The story revolves around the journey of Reverend Stephen Kumalo, a Zulu pastor who travels to Johannesburg to find his missing son, Absalom. The novel further explores the racial and social tensions of that time. As I've already said, it is just before the implosion of the apartheid regime, and then it further illuminates in the impact of racist society on individuals and communities. So it means that in this novel, the author often divert our attention from the characters, and then we focus on the circumstances. So at the backdrop, you should be knowing the context of the setting. The setting is in South Africa, in the rural village called Indonzeni, as well as in Johannesburg, meaning that we are going to vacillate between two places, being Indonzeni and Johannesburg. Okay, and then we are also going to learn about circumstances both in Indonzeni and in Johannesburg. So at times we'll read about the environment the characters are going to travel through. At times the author will take us back into the storyline where we learn more about the characters. And as we know that even now, Johannesburg remains the melting pot of South Africa. It is the economic center of South Africa. Johannesburg was founded in 1886, and then mining town, which was vast, was newly discovered gold deposits, center of the most populated region of South Africa. Now, due to the severity of poverty and I would say the injustices of apartheid not affording black people opportunities such as good education and job opportunities, people found themselves wanting and therefore they provided reasons for them to migrate from rural areas to Johannesburg solely because they were sorting out for a better life, employment, and to better their lives. Hence, we see people migrating from Ndonzeni to Johannesburg because it's the opening scene of the novel. The writer gives an explicit description of the land in Ndonzeni, that which is dry and desolate, and the soil cannot keep men anymore. And this is in the 1940s. Perhaps South Africa was still undergoing the first industrial revolution, where opportunities were very minimal, if not scanty, for black people. And for the means of survival for black people, of course, we're dependent on agricultural methods such as farming. Now, if the soil is dry, the land is desolate and dry, it therefore means that the black people were subjected to severe poverty. Hence, they migrated from Ndonzeni to Johannesburg to look for better opportunities. And the opportunities that were presented to black people were not that of any better conditions, because they were subjected to hard labor where they worked in the mines. Okay, so that is the reason for such movement. So Johannesburg remained the epicenter, if not the melting pot, of South Africa. Hence, they moved from Ndonzeni to Johannesburg. Now, let us look into the key factors and the manner in which this novel is structured. The narration is from the third voice. When the narration is from the third voice, or the novel is narrated from a third voice point of view, it simply means that the narrator is not part of the characters or part of the story, but he is somehow observing the events and narrating the events on behalf of the characters themselves. So the narrator, third person, omniscient primarily, also many other points of view on temporary basis. Now, point of view, book 1 and book 3 are narrated or told from Reverend Kumalo's point of view. It means that as the main character, being a protagonist, Reverend Stephen Kumalo, book 1, because remember this novel consists of book 1, book 2, and book 3. So book 1 and book 3, they are mainly centered around Reverend Kumalo's point of view, right? And then book 2 now is centered around another protagonist who is James Jarvis, is centered around James Jarvis' point of view. Now, other chapters told from montage of voices from different areas of South African society. As I've already said in the beginning of the lesson, that at times the narrator, who is Alien Patton, moves our attention or shifts our attention from the character, then we focus on circumstances. Let me make a brief example. When Reverend Stephen Kumalo got to Johannesburg, he wanted to locate members of his family. As I've already indicated, that people migrated from Ndonzeni to Johannesburg. And what is also worth noting is the fact that people who went to Johannesburg, they never wrote back home. They never communicated back home. Hence, it was of a need for him to locate members of his family. And by virtue of him locating members of his family, it further indicates the theme of broken families, because they did not have any form of communication. Okay. Now, with that said, when just before he could located Absalom, when he got to Johannesburg, he first located or wanted to or sought out to locate his sister Gertrude. Before we could get to Gertrude, the writer divulged our interest and attention from the character, and he explains the place called Claremont in Johannesburg. He further details or describes Claremont as a place that smells of liquor. The purpose of doing such is to give more insight to you as a reader, to understand the circumstances, the environment, and the atmosphere of the place we are now moving to with the character. And if now it says that the place smells of liquor, no wonder Gertrude is said to have been involved in selling of illegal liquor, as well as being prostitute. So the environment that we find Gertrude in suits the character of Gertrude at that point in time. So you must not be confused. At times, there's a chapter where he documents the discovery of the new mine, of the new gold in Johannesburg. That chapter also moves away from the characters, and then we focus on that. There's also a chapter where The author moves us away from the characters again, where he describes the boycotting of buses by black people because the bus fare has been increased. And we met a very colorful, vibrant character by the name of Dubula, who was leading the strike to boycott buses. So all of those, we call them supporting evidence or supporting events that lead or drives the plot to the main, if not the climax of the plot. So you must not be confused where now maybe in chapter 16 or chapter 15 the author moves our attention from characters and we get to learn about other things or other aspects that are not really centered around characters, but they are there to serve a purpose, to support the main ideas or to drive the plot to the main ideas. Right. Hence, we say narrator also shows things from other characters' perspective occasionally. We say occasionally because, like I've said, they're not the main plot, but they help to build up to what's the main plot. And then chapters which not move the plot along, but give key information necessary to understand the novel. Hence, I've just explained that. The tone is lyrical. Bear in mind that the tone is dependent on the choice of words, which we normally know as diction. It's lyrical. The tone is also grieving, bearing in mind the title said Cry the Beloved Country. Hence, I've said this is a very sad and portrays the mood of somberness and then occasionally bitter. It is narrated in a past tense and then the setting just in the mid-40s. The setting is in South Africa in a rural place called Ndontseni Ikopo, as well as in Johannesburg. And then we've got our protagonist. The word protagonist, it means the main characters in the book. We rely on them to know the essence of the book, if not the main theme of the book. We travel with them from the beginning up until the end. These are the backbone of the novel. Without them, we would not have the novel. And then in this case, we have Stephen Kumalo, who is the Reverend Stephen Kumalo, and James Jarvis. Now, at the beginning of the novel, there is no indication of how these two people are related, but there is just an indication because, surprisingly, if not shockingly enough, they reside in almost in the same place. They reside both in Ndontseni. That's what you need to capture, because at the opening scene of the book, where the author details and describes the land, he describes the land as in comparison, or he shows contrast between blacks and white by describing the land. This is how he achieves that. Firstly, he describes that the land is dry and desolate. The soil is barren. It cannot keep men anymore. Hence, people move from Ndontseni to Johannesburg. These are the people who are residing at Ndontseni. And in the same wavelength, there is another portion of the land that is green and matted. Green and matted. It's bountiful, big enough. That is the farm where James Jarvis resides. Okay, and it shows that because of he is a white man, he occupies a greater portion of the land that is fertile, that is able to keep men because the soil there is in good condition. In contrast to the people of Ndontseni down there at the valley, he lives up in the highlands of Ndontseni, and then the Reverend Stephen Kumalo resides down there at the valley where the land is dry. So there is no indication that they thoroughly know each other that much, but there is the indication because they do not stay far away from each other. So it's important to note that because this is going to make sense towards the end of the novel. And the major conflict in this novel, the crux of the novel, Stephen Kumalo struggles against the forces which are white oppression, corruption of the city life that destroy his family and country. Now, why do we say the corruption and the destroyment of his family members? Reverend Stephen Kumalo is an elderly reverend of a Anglican church. Members of his family are in Johannesburg. However, we need to know who are these members of this family and the exact reasons for each of them to be in Johannesburg. First and foremost, we have his sister Gertrude, who went to Johannesburg to look for his husband, who went there to work at the mines. I've already indicated that the challenge that of black people is that they went to Johannesburg and they never rode back home, which also exposes the theme or cements the theme of broken families. Secondly, is his brother John Kumalo, who I believe went to Johannesburg in search for greener pastures because that's where he became a prominent figure, being a politician and a businessman. He owned a carpentry shop, he was a carpenter. Now, Absalom, who is the one and only son of Reverend Stephen Kumalo, went there to look for his aunt Gertrude, who went there to look for his husband, for her husband. And all of these members, they never rode back home or came back home. Now, that's why we say that Reverend Stephen Kumalo is indeed suffering the oppression and corruption of the city life because it also broke his family by virtue of the family members being to Johannesburg and never seeing the need to ride back home. Hence, cry the beloved country. He's also somehow grieving for his family members, even though they are still alive, because there is no connection between him and the rest of his family members. Now, plot summary is that Black priest, who is Reverend Stephen Kumalo, our protagonist, is going to go to Johannesburg to search for his son. Then he discovers that his sister has become a prostitute. His son has now turned into crime and he's now a murderer. When he meets him, he's going to meet him already in jail for murdering Arthur Jarvis, who is the son of James Jarvis. Now, can you see the connection between the two protagonists? Okay. Stephen Kumalo returns to Ikobo with his pregnant daughter-in-law, who is the girlfriend of Absalom, because Absalom is already in jail and he is going to be murdered as well because he murdered Arthur Jarvis. And then his sister remains behind. Kumalo seeks to reconcile with the murdered man's father, who is James Jarvis, to bring Gertrude back home. Now, when Reverend Stephen Kumalo moves to Johannesburg, we need to understand what made Reverend Stephen Kumalo move to Johannesburg, because he was residing at the remote village of Ndonzeni in Natal. He is going to receive a letter from a fellow minister summoning him to Johannesburg, a city in Johannesburg. Now, the letter comes from Reverend T.L.L. Msimangu. In this letter, he said that he needs to come to Johannesburg because his sister, being Gertrude, is sick. Now, you need to understand and be careful. The details of Gertrude's sickness are not detailed in the letter. However, he is not sick. She is not sick physically because of her lifestyle, being a prostitute and selling liquor. Because of those conduct, they contravene or contradict the principles of Christianity that were embodied in Ndonzeni. Also, bearing in mind that her brother is a priest, so you cannot go astray and live a life of immorality, such as being a prostitute and selling illegal alcohol when your dear brother is a priest. It means that you come from a household that embodies the principles of Christianity. So Reverend T.L.L. Msimangu wrote a letter on this basis that Gertrude is sick, but meaning that she is morally sick, okay, not physically sick, morally sick simply because she was involved in conducts that were not and in that particular scene where they received a letter, it was so difficult for both Mrs. Kumalo and Reverend Stephen Kumalo to open the letter, because they were not used to receiving letters from members of the family, only to find that that letter wanted the Reverend Stephen Kumalo to go to Johannesburg. Bear in mind, this is an elderly man who's going to go to Johannesburg for the very first time. And also, what is also important to note in the opening scene, it's the tension that was brought forth by this letter between Mr. and Mrs. Kumalo. And we got to experience the pain of having members of the family who have somehow neglected both Reverend Stephen Kumalo. Also noting that Absalom is their one and only son. He went there to look for his aunt Gertrude and he never got back home. The tension also revealed another character of Reverend Stephen Kumalo, whom in the novel at the greater portion of the time, we get to see him as a very humble man of God, man of faith. But through that moment, he he was somehow rude, and he was shouting at his wife. That also exposes the depth of his pain and frustration over the fact that members of his family never write back home. And also, what brought the frustration was the fact that they did not even have money for Reverend Stephen Kumalo to travel to Johannesburg, as the letter requested him to travel to Johannesburg to attend to the matter of that Gertrude was sick. And they then opted to use money that was saved in a tin. If money is saved in a tin, it further resembles the lifestyle of that particular time and shows that, like I've said in the opening scene, that it was still through the first industrial revolution. Things were not as modernized as it is today. Money that was saved in a cocoa tin for Absalom to go to St. Ted's College, which brings another form of pain to realize that their son will never go to St. Ted's because he has long gone to Johannesburg. Secondly, Mrs. Kumalo also emptied her savings by giving Reverend Stephen Kumalo a post office book. That was the money that was saved for her to buy herself a new stove as well as a new clerical collar for Reverend Stephen Kumalo. Now, such conditions, they really show you that they were subjected to poverty themselves, as they did not have enough to even afford Reverend Stephen Kumalo to travel to Johannesburg. Now, such events of the plot, they're important to note so that we understand the background and the conditions that Reverend Stephen Kumalo lived under and he was subject to. Now, under those difficult circumstances, he still needs to travel to Johannesburg, bearing in mind again that he is an elderly man. And the rising action is when Reverend Kumalo traveled to Johannesburg to search for not only his son but members of his family. And we are going to go with him physically from place to place. You know how big Johannesburg is, how complicated the roads are, and we are going to see him being worn out emotionally, being worn out also physically, because we are searching for members of his family physically from one place to the other. And the search is not an easy search, especially the search for Absalom. You know, the clues are there, but he has to move from one place to the other. At times, there's a boycott of buses. He doesn't have any choice but to walk a very long distance. Unfortunately, he got a lift from a white gentleman who offered to give him a lift together with Reverend Theophilus Msimangu, who wrote him a letter, and he is going to be by his side at Johannesburg until the end. Now, the climax is when Absalom is arrested for the murder of Arthur Jarvis. Now, Absalom is Reverend Stephen Kumalo's son. Arthur Jarvis is James Jarvis' son. Remember, I said the two fathers are the protagonists. Now, we want to see the connection between the two. So the connection between the two, unfortunately, is that of pain, because Absalom is going to be found guilty for the murder of Arthur Jarvis. It means they both lost their sons by virtue of Absalom killing Arthur Jarvis. And Arthur Jarvis, unfortunately, we are meeting him already being a dead person, but however, we get to know more about him through his death. We get to know that he was a very prominent figure and an important figure, for that matter, for the blacks, as he advocated unashamedly for the lives of black people and for the lives of for the betterment rather of black people, as he fought for equality amongst the blacks and white. And whenever you mention such I would say descriptions of a character in literature, it's important to back it up with evidence, and evidence definitely should be deduced from the plot. if you say he was a prominent figure, what is there in a novel he has done that supports the statement that he is a prominent figure? First and foremost, he advocated for the rights of blacks through writing. He wrote manuscript. Even the night when he was murdered, he was still busy writing a manuscript about the true essence of inequalities in South Africa, where he expressed his views that blacks are subjected to crime in Johannesburg simply because they are not afforded the opportunities that white people are afforded. He also owned the African Boxing Club, that which sought to um, uh, provide a safe haven for young black boys to safeguard their lives by moving their attention from the life of crime and for them to have something to keep them busy, unlike being roaming around and committing crimes. Because young black boys at that time in Johannesburg were subjected to crime simply because their purpose was for them to go and find job at Johannesburg, but not all of them were employed. However, if they were employed, they were further exploited as they worked hard labor, were subjected to hard labor, and only getting minimal salary that was not enough to sustain them. That is the climax of the book, where finally, after the lengthy, complicated journey of locating Absalom, Reverend Kumalo finally is going to find him. Unfortunately, when he find him already being in jail for the murder of Arthur Jarvis. So he's going to meet his son for the first time after a very lengthy period in jail. And then the falling action, which is also known as denouement in literature, that's when Absalom is sentenced to death, and then Jarvis works with Kumalo to improve conditions in the village, which is where Ndonzeni, and then ultimately Absalom is hanged. Now, what is noticeable to, and I would say one of the moving aspects of this novel, it's when we get to know James Jarvis better, and also we experience him being undergoing what I can safely call radical transformation, where he is transformed by the work of his son. His son being Arthur Jarvis, because as I've already said, that he was a white man, but he advocated for the lives of black people. Now, because James Jarvis resided in Ndonzeni, he was not living in Johannesburg. We also get to know that he did not have that deep connection with his son, because it is only through the death of his son that he is going to realize that he did not know his own son. He is a white man who is somehow racist, who was not really interested in the lives of blacks, even though he lived in Ndonzeni next to the village of black people. He was only concerned, and his life was centered around only himself and his family. It is when he goes to Johannesburg to attend his son's funeral, he gets to know the depth and the life of his son. He gets to read his manuscripts, where he detailed his opinion and his advices to say, if we want to live in a harmonious society, because at that point in time, white people were fighting to say they don't feel safe in South Africa because they were subjected to the crime that was committed by young black boys, simply because they were robbing whites, because not to say it was the right thing for them to have done, but it is because it was their means of survival. And then Arthur Jarvis was saying, for us to experience a harmonious South Africa, it is only when we afford black people great opportunities like the whites. And the whites at that time were saying, we need more protection from the police force because we don't feel safe around black people. And upon reading such manuscripts, he gets to realize that I did not know my own son. Hence, towards now, book 3, we see him assisting the people of Ndonzeni. We see him employing an agricultural specialist by the name of Napoleon Litsitsi, who's going to assist the people of Ndonzeni, reconstruction of Ndonzeni, and he becomes an agent of change. Pardon me, simply because that change was informed by the work of his son, even though his son was no more. And there is also biblical references, which can also be allusion. Allusions when an author references something external to his or her work in passing manner. For example, if the author mentions or make reference to a musical artist or a song or to a great thinker or a philosopher. Now, there are many biblical references throughout this novel. For an example, the name Absalom, the son of Reverend Stephen Kumalo, shares his name with the son of King David in the Bible, who rose up against his father in rebellion. And what is the relationship between that, or the similarity between the Absalom in the Bible and the Absalom in the novel? The same way as the Absalom in the Bible, who was rebellious against his father, the Absalom in the novel also was somehow rebellious because he turned against the principles of his father. When he went to Johannesburg, he changed now his moral compass and he became involved in the life of crime. And there's also in the New Testament book the ex Saint Stephen, who was a martyr who died rather than to give up what his beliefs. And indeed, Reverend Stephen Kumalo is somehow a man of faith who clinged to his faith even under severe, if not difficult circumstances. Now, when Reverend Stephen Kumalo meets with Absalom in prison, like I've already said, that unfortunately, after a painful and lengthy journey of locating Absalom, he's going to find him in prison. Not only is he going to realize that his son has turned or changed or turned into the life of crime, but also he's going to notice that Absalom has a girlfriend, and that this girlfriend, who is not named, is just labeled as a girlfriend in the book, is also pregnant. Absalom then requests that his son be named Peter, and we know that Peter is one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. Peter, known for his impulsiveness after Christ's arrest, he denied knowing Jesus 3 times. This is also a biblical reference by naming his son who Peter. All of this suggests Absalom's final repentance, and he's committed to his faith or to the faith of his father. And then more on allusion, Arthur Jarvis is described as having a large collection of books, like the likes of Abraham Lincoln, who was a liberal fighter of the American, and then the writings of Lincoln figures heavily in the novel. And then Peyton describes Arthur's son by using the name characteristics that Arthur had when he was a child. This alludes to the rebirth of Christ. So all of these are examples of what the biblical reference in the novel. Now let us go and let's get to know more about our characters. We have our protagonists, as I've already stated, main characters. Reverend Stephen Kumalo is an elderly Zulu Anglican priest. He spent his entire life in a quiet country of a village called Indonzeni. It's important to note that he spent his entire life at Indonzeni. Hence, he's going to experience what I call culture shock when he gets to Johannesburg. You can just imagine being conversant with the life of tranquility, the life of quietness, and then all of a sudden at an elderly age, you need to go into the busiest town ever, which is Johannesburg. That is so big. It has a lot of crime, there's noise, the roads are large and big. So hence I say he's going to experience what we call a culture shock. And then occasionally, we know him as a quite humble man of faith. But you need to bear in mind, when you read literature, especially stories, such as a novel where the plot is very long or a lengthy plot, you must not be fixated to a particular characteristics of a character. The character will evolve, the character will develop against the plot. It means that the Stephen Kumalo we read about in chapter 1 may not necessarily be the same character we read about in the following chapters. It might be the same person, but due to what the character faces or the character is subjected to, we get to experience other characteristics of the character himself. For an example, occasionally we are going to see him having his outbursts of anger. Let me make an example. When he first met Absalom's girlfriend, there's a point in time where he's going to go back to the young girl. Remember, he's only 16 years. And then we get to see, I would say, a shocking character of Stephen Kumalo where he interrogated strongly, he strongly interrogated the girl to say, what happened to your first husband, what happened to your second husband? And the poor girl is still saying, he went to jail, he went to jail. And then he further went on to say, and if I, Reverend Stephen Kumalo, would say I desire you, would you agree? The girl cried. It was a sort of an embarrassing question for an old man to say, if that girl, if he could ask the girl to sleep with him, would she agree? And it was somehow a character that was shocking to me, myself as a reader, because I know him to be a noble man of God. But at that particular scene, he was not a noble man of God who strongly interrogated this poor 16-year-old girl, who was also subjected to a broken family background. That's why she ended up living in a shack and living with a criminal boyfriend by the name of Absalom. Okay, that scene alone says a lot. There's a poet in Johannesburg where he was offered a cigarette and he accepted the cigarette, which deviates from the principality of a nobleman and a man of Christianity, of being a Christian. Okay, now occasionally we get to see such characteristics of a character. So don't only say this person is loving this person, check how they evolve against the plot. His moral center of the novel, and then his journey is a physical one to find his son and sister in the corrupted city of Johannesburg. Like I've said, we are going to travel with him from place to place to locate members of his family. We have James Jarvis, who is another protagonist. As I've said, he owns he's a landowner, as he owns a beautiful farm in Ndonzeni, and he's a conservative farmer. He's a man of few words, and he, just like Arthur Jarvis, just like Reverend Stephen Kumalo, he also has only one son by the name of Arthur Jarvis. As I've already stated, he's going to go to Johannesburg also to attend his the funeral of his son. He begins to rethink his opinion and his relationship to the villagers that he lived below his farm, because he was informed by the work of his son being Arthur Jarvis, as I've already stated. His journey is a spiritual one, mental one. Now, what is also important to note, or significant to note, is that Reverend Stephen Kumalo locates his son physically, but James Jarvis locates his son emotionally and mentally, because it's only upon the death of his son that he's going to realize that he did not really know his son. Hence, you say that he was seeking his son emotionally, whereas Reverend Stephen Kumalo was seeking his son physically, locating his whereabouts. And then we've got an important a role or figure, if not character, Reverend Theophilus Musimangu, who wrote the letter to Stephen Kumalo to go to Johannesburg simply because Gertrude was sick. He's going to play a very significant role of accompanying Stephen Kumalo, also finding a place for him he is also going to assist him to get to be accommodated by Mrs. Ditebe, who's going to accommodate Reverend Stephen Kumalo at Ndonzeni, pardon me, at Johannesburg. Theophilus is very sympathetic and very supportive. He's going to be by Reverend Stephen Kumalo's side throughout the journey, especially in Johannesburg, in search for his family members. We have Absalom, who is Reverend Kumalo's son, who's going to leave Johannesburg. I've already mentioned that he's going to commit murder, and then he lacked moral compass because he was easily influenced by bad company. Let me pause here and remind you that I'm repeating that he's going to be incarcerated for the death of Arthur Jarvis. The purpose was not to go to Arthur Jarvis' house to murder him, okay? As I've already said, that young black boys were involved in a lot of crime in Johannesburg, because the belief was for them to move to Johannesburg to better their lives. But it does not mean each and every one, when they go to Johannesburg, they get employed, okay? He was involved in the life of crime. And what's also interesting to note is that he was with his cousin Matthew, who is the son of John Kumalo. So John Kumalo is the brother to Reverend Stephen Kumalo. Matthew is his son. So they are cousins. And during that fateful night, there were not only the two of them, but three. The third the accomplice was Johannes Bufuri, who used to be the housekeeper for Arthur Jarvis. So the three of them, they were involved. And then during the trial, we get to see the two denying being in the murder, and only being involved in the murder, but only Absalom confessing to the killing of Arthur Jarvis. However, it was not an intentional murder. They only went there to rob, and then due to fear, because Arthur Jarvis was not sleeping at night, he was still busy in his study, writing a manuscript about the truth about native crime. He was therefore fearful, and then because he had a gun with him, he shot Arthur Jarvis. So it's important to note circumstances of that fateful night as well. And another interesting character is John Kumalo, who is Reverend Stephen Kumalo's brother, who was formerly humble. The word formerly is because he is now a changed man when he gets to Johannesburg. He's flamboyant and arrogant. He is now a carpenter who looks down upon the people of the village, and who looks down upon the chief. Because in the novel, he even said that here in Johannesburg, I'm a man of some importance, and there in Ndonzeni, I'm a man of nothing who's subjected to be led by an uneducated king, which shows that he undermines, and he used a disconcerting tone to describe the chief. One of the three most powerful black politicians. He has a beautiful and powerful voice he uses to speak. The author describes his voice as being of a lion, that he roars, that he has a voice that has an impact, that he also uses his voice to speak out for the rights of black people in the then South Africa. And of course, we also have Arthur Jarvis, who I've said we meet him already as a dead person, because he's going to be murdered by Absalom, or he was murdered by Absalom. He is an engineer and a very fierce advocate for justice. I've already mentioned why we say he's an advocate for justice, and then he is shot dead, unfortunately, in his home by Absalom. And then we have Mrs. Kumalo, who we don't know much about, but she plays a very significant role. At the opening scene of the book, we get to meet her as a mother, as also a wife. She's described to be strong-minded and supportive and a loving wife, and we have evidence to support that. Remember, I said whatever that you say in literature, you need to back it up with evidence. There's evidence to support that he's a supportive wife and a loving wife. First and foremost, as I've said, she emptied their savings to support Reverend Stephen Kumalo, even though Reverend Stephen Kumalo was heartbroken over the fact that the money that they are using was supposed to send Absalom to St. Chad. So by using that money, it simply means that they are consenting to the fact that Absalom won't have a bright future because he's not even there. She was there to support her husband during difficult times. So she bears hardship gracefully. When Kumalo is inclined to brute, she rows him to action. She supplies the courage needed to read the bad news the letter brings from Johannesburg. And then we've got a dramatic, colorful character by the name of Gertrude, who is Stephen Kumalo's sister. Original reason for his trip to Johannesburg was for him to search for her husband. He went to Johannesburg to find her husband. However, he turned to alcohol and prostitution. And then he's also has a young son. And I can add to this bulletin that there's evidence to support the fact that Gertrude was not a fit mother. When Stephen Kumalo located her, he located her at Claremont. She was busy in a life of immorality. And then when Stephen Kumalo asked her, "Where is your son?" she wandered around. By wandering around, it means that she didn't even know the whereabouts of her son. When the son came, he looked unkept and uncared for because he was dating. which shows and support the fact that she was an unfit mother who was not taking care of her son. Now, let me pause here before we go to the form and structure. The characters that I've just mentioned are main characters, but when you read a plot, grade 12s, don't forget about the flat characters. Flat characters are characters that are not there from the beginning up until the end, but they are featured. They are featured here and there, such as Johannesburg, such as Carmichael, who is the lawyer for Absalom, such as Mrs. Ditebe, who helped to accommodate Reverend Stephen Kumalo when he came to Johannesburg. These are flat characters that you must not forget. Such as the Harrisons. The Harrisons are the in-laws of James Jarvis, because they are the brother to Mary Jarvis, who was Mary and Margaret Jarvis. One was the mother to James Jarvis, Arthur Jarvis, and the other one, Mary Jarvis, who was married to Arthur Jarvis. You need to also know the flat characters. When we summarize book 1 in the next lesson, I'm going to start the lesson first with the flat characters. So you must not only know the round characters because they are the main characters, but also know the flat characters, even though we meet them in occasionally and we do not know much of them. Now, the form and structure of the novel is a problem or sociological novel. As I've said, that it's centered around the characters, but also the circumstances of South Africa at that particular time. The novel also explores social issues and racial discrimination in South Africa. It's strongly influenced by Steenkreep's Ref. Books are alike in structure. And then the structure. The novel is secular. What do you mean by secular? It begins in Natal, in the rural area of Ndonzeni, and then we move with Reverend Kumalo to Johannesburg, and then towards the end we are going to move with John Kumalo with Reverend Stephen Kumalo again to Ndonzeni. So hence we say it's in a secular movement, meaning that the beginning of the book is the end of the book. Now, plot and themes presented in 3-part structure. Book 1, the search for Stephen Kumalo's son and sister as well as brother. Theme of tribal disintegration is stronger than tribal rebuilding in this book. So in book 1, we get to explore the theme of broken families and tribal disintegration, especially where John Kumalo states that he does not see the need of a rural life anymore. And then in book 2, we see the trial, and then through the trial of the murder of Arthur Jarvis. The chapter gives more detail of social issues and background, such as inequalities between black and whites, where we see white people fighting because they don't feel safe, especially when now Joburg is being shaken by the death of Arthur Jarvis. Remember, Arthur Jarvis was a prominent figure and an important figure for both black community and white communities. And then both major themes appear, but breakdown of traditional order is still stronger in book 2. And then book 3, that's where we see resolution and the theme of reconciliation, where Kumalo and Jarvis work together to change the life of Ndonzeni. Now, what is important to note, remember in the opening scene, the author opened the scene by describing the land as I said in the beginning of the lesson, and giving a vivid description to say at the valley there, the land was desolate, the land was dry, the maize could not even grow to reach the height of man, meaning that the people were subjected to poverty and the land cannot be used to farm as it was dry. Now, in book 3, the poverty that we read about, or the dryness of the land that we read about in book 1, now in book 3, again, the writer is going to describe the land as to be more dry, even more severe poverty. Hence, we talk about reconstruction of Ndonzeni, meaning that James Jarvis is going to be somehow the agent of change, whom he's going to employ the agricultural specialist by the name of Napoleon Nititi. who is a flat character again, whom we are going to meet only in book 3, but he's going to play a significant role of assisting the people of Ndonzeni with new agricultural methods to safeguard the livelihood of the soil, to keep the soil so that the soil cannot be desolate and lead to people moving from Johannesburg, from Ndonzeni to Johannesburg. And the main theme is going to be reconciliation between the fathers and the son, because both of them, they are searching for their sons, hence the connection between the two protagonists. Kumalo's search is that of a physical one. When Kumalo and Absalom are reunited, they are strangers to each other because they did not have that fatherly and son relationship. And then the trial brings them closer, but verdict allows Kumalo to finally understand his son. Then letter from prison show repentance, and the little boy, he remembers. Then Jarvis and his son is not a physical search but an emotional one, because upon reading the manuscript and through the also during the funeral of Arthur Jarvis, that's where we got to see black and white being mixed in one church together, which was it was due to the doings or the work or the deeds of Arthur Jarvis. Now, because of that, he's going to realize that he did not know his own son, and Arthur was an advocate for South Africa's black population. He and his father disagreed a lot on the subject of black and white, of blacks and white, as well on the subject of apartheid and inequalities. But through his son's death, he's going to realize that indeed my son served a greater purpose. Hence, he's going to undergo radical transformation and assist in the reconstruction and rebuilding of Ndonzeni. Now, Jarvis finds the way through Arthur's writings, gives Jarvis clear insight into who Arthur has become. Jarvis feels pride for his son. He was somehow moved and motivated by the work of his son. Now, the theme of inequality and injustice is explored in greater depth in the novel, throughout the novel, from just the description of the land in the beginning, the two portions of the land that are not described the same, and then there's massive inequalities between non-whites and black. Black can only own limited amount of land, which is relatively poor and overworked, as described in the beginning or opening scene of the novel. Land won't support young adults. They must leave to work in the mines at Johannesburg. Absalom and Gertrude are good examples of how this movement from Johannesburg, from Ndonzeni to Johannesburg, had a negative impact on their social structure and family structure, because they both turned out to become people who diverge strongly against their moral compass and principalities of Christianity, as Absalom turned into crime and he ended up killing Arthur Jarvis. There's also great inequalities when it comes to economic layer of city leads to danger, because for an example, again, Gertrude, she went there to look for her husband. Unfortunately, when she got there, she turned out to be a prostitute and also being involved in the life of selling illegal alcohol. This condition leads to anger and to violence. Hence, young boys such as Absalom, Matthew, and Johannes Porphyry ended up committing crime by robbing white people's home, and then more injustice occurs, and this makes situations worse. Absalom's lawyer claims Absalom is a society's victim. White gets government troops to crack down, and the situation explodes. There's a theme of Christianity and injustice. Kumalo's main source of strength is God. He was always clinging his faith to God. Christianity is also aids in resisting oppression. Arthur Jarvis calls the mine policies unchristian. Religion is seen as a way to bring social justice without violence. Christianity is also part of the injustice. Then black priests are paid less than white ones. And then religion also says to suffer, religion says to suffer, not fight back. Arthur Jarvis also discusses that religious figures claim God wants white to rule over black. There's also the depiction of nature. which shows severe contrast between the beauty of Natal against the ugliness of South Africa. Hills and rivers of the white are more fruitful and lovely. This is where I said this is where James Jarvis reside in Ndonzeni, whereas black people like Stephen Kumalo occupying the land that is barren, dry, and hostile. Hence, again, I'm repeating, these are the conditions that led people to migrate from Ndonzeni to Johannesburg in search for greener pastures. Contrast between beauty of the land versus ugliness of society provides or show the reason for necessary for change. The land can be restored, and indeed the land is going to be restored in book 3, which is the end of the novel. Okay, then there's what we call symbolism. There's a bird called Titihoya. In the beginning, where the writer describes the land, there's a part where the Titihoya cries, and there's a part where the Titihoya is mute. It means that the Titihoya does not cry. And this is because the Titihoya only cries where there's water and where the land is bountiful, where the land is fertile, where the land is green. Of course, the Titihoya will cry away in the highlands where James Jarvis resides. But the Titihoya does not cry where the land is deserted, when the land is dry, when the land where there is no water. So when the author says the Titihoya does not cry, it signifies poverty because the land is hard, the land is dry, and this is what we call symbolism. We've got also symbols. The church and the manner in which the church is described as being built from rough structures, and also it was leaking. It represents faith. The church in this novel represents faith. And then also the church shows the relationship close link between Kumalo and Christianity. And then towards the rebuilding and reconstruction of Ndonzeni, one of the most important things that James Jarvis is going to do after changing his character and perception through the death of his son is that he's going to rebuild a new church for the people of Ndonzeni, which is a symbol of his commitment to the village, and the friendship is going to form with Kumalo, which is quite a bit ironic because ideally would expect them not to have any form of connection, or maybe James Jarvis to be resentful towards Reverend Stephen Kumalo over the fact that his son is the one who murdered his son. But however, because he was informed and somehow motivated by the works of his son, he forgave Stephen Kumalo. He even befriended Stephen Kumalo, unlike under normal circumstances where we would expect them not to have a relationship, or for him to even blame him to say, it's your son who robbed me of joy because he killed my son. But that was not the case. And that is an overview of the novel. In the next lesson, we are going to do a thorough summary of book 1. Please read the novel before you can view this summarized version, because some of the events I'm not going to touch base on, but it becomes easier for you to understand this summarized version if you have read the novel. I hope this will be another insightful lesson to help you understand the novel better and to prepare for final examination paper 2. Thank you.